Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Now, the issue of black money stashed in tax havens across the world has come to the limelight yet again. Swiss authorities have said that they will share a list of black money holders with the Indian government. So what is black money? How is it generated? Why do people move money to tax havens? And how do we prevent it? These are some of the questions that we're going to try and answer on this edition of The Big Picture. Let me first introduce our guests on the show today. Of course, we have with us Nalin Kohli of the BJP. Nalin, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us here. Of course, we have with us Rashmi Kant as well, spokesperson of the Congress, and also Jagannadham Thunuguntla, who's an equity head at SMC Capital, and Soma Banerjee, advisor, National Power Energy CII. I'd like to start with you, of course, Soma, and why don't you put it into perspective for us and tell us, in fact, start with a simple question and tell us what exactly is black money?
Well, anything that's not accounted for in a layman's term is what we understand is black money all about. So even a small thing like paying somebody which has no accountability in your daily transactions could be black money. So when you can't find trail of the money which is being transferred in a transaction is what we understand by black money. Why black money and why this huge debate over black money? Because as it's coming to be over years understood that a large portion of our economy is now dealing in black money, which is basically because of non-transparency not just in business and trade, but I think a lot of it is also to do with funding of various activities, including political funding, which has often been one of the gray areas which people have said leads to a lot of black money. I think a large part of it is being addressed through the tax changes which we have been seeing over the years, and I'm sure we will see much more of that because we've already adopted certain norms, also certain international agreements, the G20 agreements we have participated and signed on will help us move this away. But as of now, it still sits as a big bug in our system which we need to deal with.
It sits as a big bug. What is the government, Nalin, going to do to ensure this money is brought back? It has been one of your, important things that you went to polls with.
Yeah. Of course, it's been an agenda with us for a while. In 2009, it was an election issue also. However, I think we need to distinguish between black money in terms of A, the unaccounted money within India, which is already in circulation of the economy, and that which is stashed abroad, which is not in circulation and therefore a wasted asset. Now, as Soma was just putting it across, the unaccounted money is also because of two reasons. One is the size of the Indian population and the number of transactions that take place in cash. You go to buy even something at a small shop, you're paying in cash, and there's no receipt. So that's about extending the tax net, and that's been slow for a while. So we have a very small percentage of people who are actually in the net. Who pay taxes, though the number of people who may be covered in terms of being, they are already filing returns and not paying taxes is large, but the actual taxpayers is a very limited number as compared to the total population. So that's one end. So that needs to be seen through tax reform. In terms of income tax rates, we are fairly competitive because there are economies that in the West that have very high tax rates, 50% to even 70-75%. Sure. And I'm talking of the developed in Europe and the USA. So rates-wise, India has moved in that area and come down to more what I call as manageable or acceptable rates. But it's the number of transactions and bringing them into the structure of tax planning and into the structure of accounted money domestically is a challenge, and which of course is part of ongoing reform. The second issue is the one which is today mostly in the news, which is the amount of wealth stashed abroad, which means it has been either illegitimately taken out, or it is illegitimate funds, or it is just rooting out funds from here and parking it abroad for bringing it back as investment into India or to other destinations. And that's the one which has been in focus. And as far as the government is there, of course, the SIT had been formed among the first cabinet decisions of the new government under Prime Minister Modi. And from that perspective, today we've got a statement also.
So the message that you're trying to send out is that you're serious, but once the list is made available to the Indian authorities,
I think it's a continual process.
Is it going to be a selective list that you're going to give out? What's going to be the next process?
Well, I think what you could expect the government to do is once you have the list, really start taking action on it. There are three parts to it, just as a comment. You need to take action against the individuals. You need to bring the amount of money back into the country, which is the second part of it, and you need to establish legal framework for it not to take place again. So I think this is broadly the three steps that one would look at.
Okay, yeah, Soma, you
I
want to
think
say
the
something?
finance minister has already made a statement today, which I think shows that the government is proactively looking at this, because he said they're writing to the Swiss authorities on their own. So while this has come out as a matter in the public because of reports in the media, and there is no official communication as per Mr. Jaitley from the Swiss authorities yet, the finance minister actually told people, told reporters today that he or the finance ministry is writing. So I think that shows that the government is proactive about taking some action on this.
Okay, the government is proactive. One of the major criticisms as far as the Congress was concerned, Rashmi, Kant, is the fact that the Congress really was not too serious about getting this list, because there were several reports that said that there were several congressmen who had in fact stashed their money abroad. So why do you think there is a sudden movement in this particular direction where the list is actually going to be made available to the Indian authorities now?
Well, you mentioned the congressman part of it, and I think that is more speculative more than without backed by any evidence. However, I would not like to take this, I would like to try and keep this debate as bipartisan as possible.
Okay.
The fact of the matter is that we are talking about black money, which has been defined to an extent by Soma earlier, and which is unaccounted money where people don't pay taxes on it, which it doesn't generate any assets. But there are three fundamental issues. There's a triad to it. First is that, you talked about the Swiss thing today. After all, Soma mentioned the letter, or Nalin mentioned about a letter that the finance minister has written to the Swiss authorities. We must remember that Switzerland is just one of the 70 tax havens across the world. It's not just the only one. So while it's very popular to say because Switzerland was one of the earliest ones, but there's 70 tax havens across the world. And there is a lot of multi-layering that is sort of involved in it, going from one level to the second, to the third, to the fourth, to the fifth, to the sixth. So that by the end of it, it is very difficult to trace whose money is it. So therefore, when the Swiss say we'll give you names and we read figures of 14,000 crores, the illegitimate amount of money is probably much more stashed internationally. But the 14,000 crores is probably because Government of India does allow money to be opened in bank accounts by corporates, by people doing business outside. However, it is, in my opinion, highly unlikely that even if you get the names of people who have these accounts, if and when they are given by Switzerland, will really reveal the illegitimate part of the money. It will probably reveal the legitimate part of the money. For example, Tata's, for example, the big corporate houses who have sort of businesses abroad. And so this could be a diversionary tactic by the Swiss, and it has been resorted to by other tax havens also. Now you come to the SIT. The fact is that the government, of course, correctly did, and they were, of course, under pressure. There was the date given by the Supreme Court of the 28th. You formed an SIT. It's a good thing. But the fact is that it consists of a triad, which is the bureaucracy, which is the politicians, and which is the businessmen. It is these people who have black money stashed abroad. It is not the poor people who have stashed the black money abroad. It is not that you don't have knowledge. The interesting thing is that the Indian economy, the GDP today. Let me quickly complete before you intervene. The Indian economy today is $1.8 trillion, and it is assumed by experts that the black money part of it is an additional $900 billion, which is 50% of the legitimate economy. And out of this 900 billion, 10% goes outside the country, and 90%, which is $810 billion, remains within the country. So it is equally important to pay emphasis on the black money which is stashed inside the country, as well as choke channels that take black money outside the country, essentially through the Hawala route. It is not that the investigative agencies don't have the information or the evidence of it. It is a question of political will, and we'll have to see how the government goes.
I think Nalin should answer that. It's a question of political will. The big fish are going to be let off the hook yet again, because there's going to be some kind of a loophole where you find, the big wigs to escape without really getting caught, is what he's suggesting.
It should have been really directed to Rashmi Kanji. However, in our case, it's a new government, and the government has already moved on it. Even while it may be said that the Supreme Court had put out a date, the question is, why was the Supreme Court needed to put out a date? It's because the SIT hadn't been formed, or should have been formed earlier. We are very serious about it because this has been an election issue for us starting from 2009. It's one of our commitments. In terms of the political will, certainly. The BJP had also as a party gone ahead and our members of parliament in the last Lok Sabha had said, we don't have black money and given affidavits on that. So therefore, from the point being, we are very serious about it and you will see action on it. All the points that Rashmi Kanji is saying, certainly they are part of the larger issue of black money. They are valid points there. What needs to be done is action on them. And otherwise, you know, everyone knows, you have the investigative agencies, you understand there are loopholes, they have to be, but the political will, as he rightly says, and that's exactly what we expect our government to do, is display that political will.
You want to quickly
I don't want to, again, even though Nalin sort of could not resist taking a political dig, I don't want to sort of, I don't want to make this less bipartisan because I think it's a national issue that deserves national attention across political parties. So, the most important thing in my opinion that the government should concentrate on is, apart from the fact, correctly so, look at tax havens, and which is not just Switzerland, which is also the 69 other tax havens, but choke the money going outside.
It's part of it.
Okay, which is the Hawala operators, as you agreed upon. And the second part is, how do businessmen do it? Hawala is used by businessmen, which is used by politicians, which is used by others, which is used by bureaucrats. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, if you have to choke it, you will have to necessarily have and that cannot come merely through legislations. You've got Lokpal, it has to be somewhere outside the ambit of the government system. Because what you have in the SIT are the same kind of people. I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about the hierarchy, the civil servants, the politicians, the executive, who are responsible for the black money. That's why something like the Lokpal is very important, which is outside the ambit of the government, so that it can act independently. And should we, if we concentrated equally or more on the money which is stashed inside the country, which is close to $800 million, our external debt is $400 billion.
I'm going to talk about that as well. I'm going to talk about the effect or the impact that this black money is going to have on the Indian economy. But before that, let me bring Jagannadham in. Of course, Rashmi Kant was talking about a few numbers. So let's talk about numbers here. Of course, there have been several reports, Jagannadham, in the media and elsewhere as well that suggest that there could be trillions of dollars stashed in Swiss banks and other tax havens. There are other reports that say that there could be anything between 1,500 to 5,000 crores stashed abroad. What is the figure, like at the moment? I mean, can we pinpoint and say there could be this much money or that much money stashed abroad?
Difficult to put any number. I think, as rightly said, that $1.8 trillion is the India's GDP size. To put in Indian terms, that's about 1 crore crores. That is the total India's GDP size. Different people put about different figures. Let's say 50% of India's GDP is in black money, etc., etc. That means we are talking about a good 50 lakh crores as the total proportion of the size of the game. Now, question is about, if 90% of it is inside the country, means that we are about 45 lakh crores. That's a lot of money, because then if we can able to really address even the internal issue, forget about the tax havens or the outside money and Hawala, etc. I think probably we don't, no Indian need to pay tax anytime in the next 5 to 6 years, because that much tax collection can be exempted once for all, because let's say 45 lakh crores, even if we can able to address the internal issue, I think that is one area probably we can able to address. For example, every year, even to get a 40,000 crores of divestment proceeds, lots of hue and cry happens. Now, if we can able to address a 40 lakh crores of game, which many people say maybe within the country, probably Indians need not pay tax for several years.
Okay. Rashmi, I saw you putting up your hand.
I just quickly wanted to make a point that Soma also made earlier and the gentleman there also made earlier about tax. I think Nalin was right to the extent that we pretty much reached the right international level of 30%. For example, in 1971, the tax was as high as 97.5%, and international 97.5%, and internationally it was, and nationally it was agreed that the black money component was only 5%. While today, you have a $2 trillion economy, your tax rates have gone down to 30%, but people are still not paying taxes. There is, Nalin was talking about millions, the correct figure is there's 37 million people who file their tax returns, but only 12 million people actually end up paying taxes. The others are basically very minimal. So it is not really related to tax reforms. Ultimately, what is needed is not merely legislations. Legislations are important. But I think apart from the political will, it is the people who have to be constantly educated, and there has to be people's movements along. And I'm not talking about the NGO sort of stuff or the green. I'm talking about the Indian people being constantly sensitized to the fact how black money is affecting the future of India. For it is not just for paying off foreign debt. It is the amount of extra money that you could put in education. For example, it is estimated that $100 billion is going to be paid over the next 10 years, spent over the next 10 years on defense, which means roughly $10 billion a year. Now, what is $10 billion a year if you were able to recover $900 billion a year? It is nothing. So, I think that black money has, so therefore, this internal thing is equally important, while I do not undervalue the importance of getting money from outside, which is illegitimate. Though I'd like to make a small little point which people generally overlook. I'm generally against using the word black money, because that sounds very racist. Anything which is black is bad. Anything which is white is good. We're talking about illegitimate money. We're talking about money which doesn't have any accounting and things like that. So that was just a small
let's bring in Soma as well. She wants to come into the debate.
I was just thinking that, while we all keep talking about, investigations, bringing proactive culture, proactive notions, there's one thing in this entire piece which can do a lot. Which is banking access. That is one thing which can really increase even taxation or payment transactions not going unaccounted. And that is one sector which needs to really reach out much more deeper into our economy, farther into the rural economy, even in the Mufassil areas. I wouldn't say that we are. So, whether it is the public sector, private sector, or whatever, we would expect, and I think that is something which this government will be looking into, to see that there is a deepening of the banking sector into the economy, because that is one also positive way of looking for actually curbing the internal generation of unaccounted money. And secondly, what I mentioned, on this entire culture, I think that's a very, very important point. It's this whole thing of accountability, which I think is happening. I mean, to an extent, I think as a citizen, I see people around are becoming more accountable as a citizen of this country. So it is about...
But isn't that number minuscule? At the moment, at least.
I would think that with the younger generation, that thing is catching up much more, than what it was before. And we hope that people who are younger are going to be more proactively concerned about what they are doing for the society or as a citizen of this country. So, when it comes to just filing tax returns, they are conscious about what they are doing, and it's not something that they would like to. I mean, the newer corporates, for instance, I definitely think are people who are more bothered about their tax return. And tax being at a level which is not harming their enterprise is an incentive by itself to say that you file taxes and don't do things unaccountably. So
can I make a quick point?
Quick.
Can I make a quick? You talked about the banking sector. The fact is the banking sector itself has been a part of the black money generation. For UBS was fined to $750 million in the United States by the United States government in 2009. And they were supposed to give a huge 52,000 names, and they ended up giving 4,500 names. Credit Suisse has recently been fined $2.5 billion.
Yes.
They have been part of the Hawala transaction, and that's why what they have done is very, very smartly, and most of the international banks, they've set up branches across, not in Switzerland, but in Dubai, but in Singapore, and things like that. I'd like to read 3 lines to you, very crucial 3 lines. You're talking about the banking system and the integrity of the banking system. That one important point must be, in 2008, when the financial crisis took place, that time Fortis Bank collapsed. The Netherlands government took over and found that Fortis Bank had 700 subsidiaries in tax havens. So the whole purpose of subsidiaries in tax havens is to allow high net worth individuals to move money.
Yes.
So while it's very important to deepen banking, it's important to do transactions legitimately. As was said by somebody very correctly, that there's so many transactions which are cash, and we should sort of see to it that these cash transactions are lessened and minimized to the extent possible, as much as possible. But the fact is that the banks are equally guilty in this.
But isn't that to do with regulatory systems? systems, because I mean you can't throw the baby out with the
No,
water.
I think, in my opinion, there's too much there's too much that we give to the secrecy in banks. There's got to be much more transparency
so
brought
that's
into
what
the banking
robust
system
regulatory
also.
system is all about.
I think, it's a matter of all. It's really not one or the other.
Sure.
And there's a truth there. If you look at the new breed of Indians who have started using plastic money in terms of credit cards and, things getting tied up, net banking, it's increasing. But at the same time, there is the gap also with rural India. And I think from that point, Soma is absolutely right. We don't have the depth of financial services still in rural areas. Of course, you need to have, just because even the best economies in the West have not been able to bring in banking regulations to prevent. You've seen a global collapse with the Lehman Brothers. You've had just now the example of Credit Suisse and all. But at the so therefore, you need to work on all. You need not only tax reform, simplification, you also need the punitive measures. You also need the encouragement. You need to extend the net. You need to bring more people in there, increase compliance, bring self-regulation. So it's a movement towards all of it. But when you come to the issue of black money per se, I keep the amounts that are parked there, if Government of India, and which is what we hope our government will now do, sends the message that we will do business on this ethicality, that there is no funds there, the international information comes. The Americans could get the information. The Germans were willing to give the information. So we are in that position, I think, and India is an important destination globally. If we get our act together economically, certainly we are a critical of importance to many countries in the world.
Okay.
So I think we can see cooperation on this. On the internal black money issue, I think a reduction of cash transactions is a process. We have to move in that direction, but in some sectors we'll achieve it faster, like in the urban sectors, the younger elements, corporate sectors. But over a period of time, once banking reaches the rural sectors, I think we'll be able to reduce the gap there too.
Okay, that's how we'll be able to reduce the gap, is how Nalin is putting it, of course. Jagannadham, I mean, this particular issue, the issue of black money, is a major issue. Now, if we have to prevent it from happening, what are the steps do you believe that need to be taken to ensure that, this particular problem is brought down to a minimum?
As rightly said by somebody, that the new generation started using the plastic money and online banking. What it will do is that there is a trail you can establish for all the transactions. On top of that, even the e-merchandising means e-retailing means most of the Indians started buying off late many of the goods on the websites. That also adds to the equation. So what I'm trying to say is that it may take a while. It won't happen overnight, but it may take, say, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I don't know how many years. But eventually, I think by the time this current generation becomes into their middle ages, probably they'll see a much better tax compliance system.
Okay. Yeah.
My point is that while internationally it may take time, because it's not, for example, I was thinking, what is it that we can do to pressurize a country like Switzerland? We don't have great international trade with them. And if Indo-Swiss relations really broke down, if Switzerland is not giving the names to a country like the United States of America, the illegitimate names, it'll take time. It's not going to be an event, it's going to be a process. But the fact is, if there's one single thing which can reduce this drastically, it is taking action domestically. Because what do businessmen do? For the case of imports, they will do over-invoicing because they're taking money from the banks. They will do over-invoicing and keep the extra money outside. In the case of exports, they'll do under-invoicing and keep the money outside. So you've got to work on multiple factors, but there's plastic money and things like that. These are important things, but the big ticket black money generation is happening within this country. It is happening with corporates, it's happening with the executive, it's happening, I dare say, even with the judiciary to a large extent, which has come under the lens of, under the scanner of people, where people are increasingly losing faith in the judiciary, being an institution of purity. So, while we'll have to work at a multiple level, I think a significant emphasis must be paid on the choking of the sectors or choking of the elements which take the money out, and then you do various things like round tripping and things like that. So I think that's a critical thing that we keep, without losing sight of the fact that we've got to legitimately get the money which belongs to India.
I can see Nalin shaking his head. He doesn't agree with what you say.
Agreeing with that is corruption, and that's exactly what the fight against corruption has to be, because corruption actually leads to that. So I mean, that's the larger fight in any case.
No, Nalin, it's not just, for example, let's say take a businessman who's evading taxes. He is not he is not being corrupt to the extent as corruption is understood.
That's what I was coming to.
Political corruption.
Rashmi, the two of, that's what I'm saying. Corruption larger is illegitimate gratification. So what I was trying to say,
at times.
yeah, it's an illegitimate gratification which extends to, and that's a massive national problem, which is one of the agendas. But the black money fight is a subset of that, which is also, it's basically transactions may be legitimate, tax evasion is there. The second aspect of it is transactions itself are illegitimate and therefore it has generated cash which is transacted and kept abroad or kept in India. It's an aspect of both. That's why when I was saying early on, it's a movement against all. But what happens is when you start going after something specifically and you start yielding results, when you start finding high net individuals or prominent people who have stashed money abroad, have no explanations for it, that itself is also a movement to restrict people who may otherwise feel encouraged. So that's the larger atmospherics of it.
Okay. But my point is that can be reduced.
Very quickly, because we're completely running out of time.
Sure.
I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Just make your final comments, Rashmi.
My final comment is again that there is three aspects to black money. I think purely in today's context, the Switzerland thing, I think it's a diversionary tactic and it is unlikely, I hope it is successful, it is unlikely that it is going to pay any sort of dividends. Number two, there is a triad of bureaucracy, politicians and businessmen that needs to be broken, and the internal factor which is 90%, which generates 90% of the money lying within India, needs to pay.
Soma, final comments from you.
Yeah, so I would like to say what are the things that they can do. One is transparency, bring in transparency in trade, in practices, increase transparency in your systems. Second is that do not go witch hunting. You know, whenever we hear of these kind of things, all of corporate is bad, all of corporate is doing, you know, we are already in a system where there is a lot of pessimism around the investments. There is a case to be done. Please go after that case, but do not do a broad brush thing of every corporate house is invoicing or under invoicing.
Don't generalize,
Don't
go after
generalize,
the guilty.
yeah. And thirdly, deepen things as far as banking is concerned, deepen things as far as tax collections are concerned, improve the culture of tax paying and accountability.
Okay. Jagannadham, final thoughts from you, of course.
If lots of internal systems can be repaired, I feel that at least creation of new black money can be avoided, so that at least the old black money which is already in the system, probably how to bring it back is a second question. At least if we can able to prevent a creation process of the new black money, to that extent at least we would have achieved lots of achievement.
Nalin, I'd like you to quickly sum it up for us in 10 seconds and have the final
It's very
word.
easy. This government has already started on that note, and I think you'll start seeing more and more movement to it. It's only less than a month yet, but you'll see whatever it takes to work on this, including tax reform, including how to see it. I think this government has will show you results eventually.
All right, completely out of time. We'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Nalin, Kohli, Rashmi, Kant, Jagannadham and Soma Banerjee, thank you so much for joining us here on the show and putting things into perspective for us. We hope that we've been able to answer some of those questions that have been nagging in your mind about black money. That's it on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you so much for watching. Do stay tuned for more after this short break.